All right, I want you to try a little mental exercise with me, just for a second. Picture ancient Egypt. What's the first thing that pops into your head?
Oh, it's always the same, isn't it? The pyramids, probably.
I'm willing to bet it's the Great Pyramids at Giza, maybe the Sphinx staring at the horizon. It all feels so eternal. Like it was always there, solid and unshakable.
That is exactly how we're conditioned to see it,
Hmm.
as this, monolith of history.
But today, we're going to strip all of that away. We're going way, way back. Before the pyramids were even a sketch on a papyrus scroll, before the gods were carved in stone.
We're going back to a time around 3000 BCE when Egypt wasn't a guarantee.
Not at all. It was a startup. And honestly, a pretty fragile experiment.
The startup analogy is perfect because when you really look at the source material for the first dynasty, you realize nothing about Egypt was inevitable.
Right.
We look back and see 3,000 years of success, but the people living through it, they were making it up as they went along.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We're looking at the first dynasty. Not just as a list of names you might have skimmed over, but as the specific group of people who wrote the source code for an entire civilization.
Exactly. It's not just a timeline, it's a dramatic arc. It reads like a political thriller.
It really does.
You have this violent unification, then a frantic consolidation of power, a golden age of stability, and then, as always seems to happen, a crisis that almost tears the whole thing apart.
It's got everything. We're talking about erased history, environmental disasters, political maneuvering, and this part actually stopped me cold state-sanctioned human sacrifice.
It is a wild ride. But to understand the stakes, we have to understand the map.
Yeah.
Before this dynasty, there was no single Egypt.
Right. The sources make a big deal about the geography. You had Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And for anyone listening who isn't looking at a map, this is always the confusing part.
It's so counterintuitive. Upper Egypt is actually the south, the Nile Valley, because the river flows from south to north.
And Lower Egypt is the north, the delta.
Exactly. Where the river fans out into the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
But the sources emphasize that these weren't just, different neighborhoods. They were distinct cultures.
Completely different.
Well, yeah, different pottery, different burial customs, different gods.
Yeah.
Merging them wasn't some natural evolution. It was a hostile takeover.
Which brings us to Act 1, the birth of a kingdom, and the man of the hour, Narmer.
Narmer, the unifier. Now, historically, there's been a lot of debate. You'll see the name Mens in old Greek texts as the legendary founder. But the archaeology, it just keeps pointing to Narmer as the real driving force.
The key piece of evidence here is the Narmer Palette. I was looking at the images. It's not subtle.
Not subtle at all. It's brutal. It is essentially the world's first political propaganda poster carved in stone.
Wow.
On one side, you have Narmer wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, and he's grabbing an enemy by the hair, raising a mace to smash his skull.
That classic smitey pose.
Exactly. It sets the tone for the next 3 millennia. But then, on the other side, he's wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt, marching past rows of decapitated bodies.
With their heads placed neatly between their legs.
Yeah. So the message is pretty clear.
I won.
It's more than that. By wearing both crowns on the same object, he's inventing a new concept, the dual king. He isn't just a conqueror occupying territory. He is the unification. This is the moment the concept of Pharaoh was born.
But here's where the sources get a little nuanced. They ask, was it really just this one guy smashing heads? Or was Narmer just the guy who, I don't know, cut the ribbon at the end of a long project?
That's the whole man's debate in a nutshell. Most modern scholars, looking at trade routes and pottery, think unification was a slow, sort of economic process.
So the cultures were already blending.
For generations. Narmer is likely just the political figure who finalized it. He closed the deal, probably with violence, but the momentum was already there.
So Narmer draws the map. He conquers the north. But you can't run a country just by smashing things with a mace.
No. Eventually, you have to file the paperwork.
Which is the hardest part of the startup phase. And that brings us to the second ruler, Hor-Aha.
Hor-Aha.
The builder.
Yeah, if Narmer was the general, Hor-Aha feels more like the CEO.
That's a great distinction. Narmer won the war, but Hor-Aha won the peace. He realized that to rule these two very different lands, you couldn't stay in the south. You had to be in the middle.
The founding of Memphis?
Right. He establishes the capital at Memphis, which is located right at the apex of the delta. It's the fulcrum point. If you control Memphis, you can control the trade routes from the delta and the grain from the valley at the same time.
It's purely strategic. But he also starts building the brand of the monarchy, doesn't he?
He does. He expands the royal cult. He establishes the rituals, the administrative systems that let the government function. And this is why some historians wonder if he was actually the legendary Manus. Because while Narmer did the fighting,
Hor-Aha built the country. Exactly. It's the classic question of what matters more, the conquest or the constitution. And Hor-Aha proves that the system is what keeps you in power.
okay, so the borders are drawn, the capital is built. We move into Act 2, building the system. And we meet a king named Djer. And I have to be honest, this is where the research took a dark turn for me.
You're talking about the tomb at Abydos.
I am. The sources describe Djer's reign as stable and prosperous, but then they mention the subsidiary burials. That is a very polite way of saying mass human sacrifice.
It is shocking to modern sensibilities, absolutely. Around Djer's tomb, archaeologists found hundreds of separate graves.
Hundreds.
Hundreds. We're talking about courtiers, servants, dwarfs, even dogs and lions. And the forensic evidence suggests they all died at the same time.
So let's unpack the why here, because this isn't just cruelty, is it? You don't kill your skilled staff just for the sake of it.
No, it's deeply theological and economic. It implies that a very specific ideology of divine kingship had really taken root. The idea was that the king wasn't just a ruler. He was the battery that powered the universe, the bridge to the gods.
So if the battery dies,
If the king dies, his entire entourage needs to go with him to serve him in the afterlife. It was seen as a necessity for the cosmos to keep functioning.
the power dynamic there is just terrifying.
To convince or force hundreds of people to die just because you did, that shows absolute control. It's also a statement.
A statement of what?
Wealth. It's conspicuous consumption of human life. It's the state saying, we are so powerful and the afterlife is so real that we can afford to burn this human capital.
It's a gruesome proof of concept. The system is working.
It is. And that stability continues into the next reign, a king named Djet. The sources call it the quiet reign.
Which usually means we lost the paperwork.
Often, yes. His reign was short. But structurally, within the story of the dynasty, Djet feels like a tremor. The ground shakes a little. The sources speculate. Was it a natural death? Or was there some internal instability? We just don't know for sure.
But if Djet was a tremor, the next guy is the earthquake. In a good way. We hit the absolute peak of the first dynasty with King Den.
Den, the Golden Age. If you want to picture that classic pharaoh image starting to form, it happens right here.
The sources are obsessed with this guy. He rules for decades, expands the borders. But the detail that stuck out to me was his fashion choice. He is the first ruler depicted wearing the double crown.
That is a massive moment in visual branding. Before Den, kings would be shown wearing the white crown of the south or the red crown of the north.
Depending on the occasion.
Right. Den physically combined them into one headpiece. The Shint. It seems like a small thing, but it's a huge political statement.
It's the United Kingdom Declaration. He's not two things, he's one thing.
Exactly. The seam between north and south is gone.
Yeah.
And he backs it up with administrative innovation. We see the refinement of the royal titulary, the fancy titles the king uses.
And crucially, the Heb-Sed festival.
The Jubilee, yes. After ruling for 30 years, the king would have to perform a ritual run, literally running laps around markers, to prove he was still physically fit to lead.
A royal obstacle course.
To rejuvenate his divine power, yeah. Den is showing us a system that is confident, ritualized, and incredibly wealthy.
If you lived during the reign of Den, you would think this dynasty would last forever. The system is perfect.
But that is the trap of history, isn't it? The moment you think you've won the game, the rules change. And that brings us to Act 3, cracks in the foundation.
The vibe in the sources just shifts instantly here. We go from the glory of Den to a ruler named Anedjib, and the word that keeps coming up is legitimacy.
Right. Suddenly the archaeology gets messy. We find stone vessels where Anedjib's name has been scratched out, or his name is painted clumsily over someone else's.
Ancient cancel culture.
In a way, it's called damnatio memoria. But this early on, it suggests a real struggle for the throne. Was Anedjib a usurper? A weak heir? We see statue bases where his titles are carved poorly, like they were done in a hurry.
That sounds like a government in panic mode.
It is. The absolute authority we saw with Djer and Den, that I can order 300 people to die with me. Power is fracturing. And when political authority fractures in Egypt, the environment usually decides to pile on.
Which brings us to Semerkhet.
Semerkhet. If Anedjib was the crack in the dam, Semerkhet is the flood. His reign is defined by one word: calamity.
The sources list a few hypotheses: famine, Nile irregularities, political fragmentation. It sounds like everything that could go wrong did.
It's the collision of nature and politics. We have to remember the concept of ma'at.
Right, ma'at, that's truth or cosmic balance.
Yes, cosmic balance. In the Egyptian worldview, the king was responsible for maintaining ma'at. If the Nile didn't flood properly, it wasn't just bad weather.
It was a theological failure.
It meant the king wasn't doing his job.
That is a tough performance review. The river didn't rise, so you're fired.
Basically. So you have political instability, compounded by environmental disaster, the people are hungry, the court is fighting, the gods seem angry. This is the moment where the fragile experiment is in serious danger of failing.
It feels like the moment where the startup goes bankrupt. It could have easily broken back apart into north and south right there.
It really could have. We see it happen later in Egyptian history, the intermediate periods. But here, for the first time, the system is stress-tested. Can the idea of Egypt survive a bad king?
Which brings us to the finale, Act 4. The end of a dynasty. We have one last king.
Qa'a is the closer. He's not the most famous name, but he might be one of the most important for the survival of the state. He didn't build the dynasty like Narmer, and he didn't reach the peaks of Den. His job was to stop the bleeding.
The sources say he restored stability.
He did. He managed to close out the dynasty without destroying Egypt. He restored some of the royal tombs that had been vandalized. He bridged the gap. But, and this is key, he leaves no clear heir.
And this is where the transition happens. The first dynasty ends, the family line stops, but the country doesn't. We get the second dynasty. And the sources highlight the name of the first king of this new line, Hotep-Sekemwy.
I love Egyptian names. They are always mission statements. Hotep-Sekemwy translates to the two powers are reconciled.
The two powers are reconciled. That is incredibly suggestive.
It's a smoking gun. You don't name yourself peace has been restored unless there was a massive war right before you showed up.
So when he says two powers, is he talking about north and south again? Or something else?
It could be north and south.
Yeah.
But many scholars think it refers to rival religious factions, maybe followers of the god Horus and followers of the god Seth. It implies the end of the first dynasty wasn't a quiet fading away. It was a conflict, a civil war maybe.
But the crucial thing is, the system held. The man changed, but the office remained.
Exactly. That is the triumph of the first dynasty. They built a container, the state, that was strong enough to hold the chaos. Hotep-Sekemwy comes in and says, okay, the fight is over, we are reconciled, and the machinery of government kept turning.
So let's zoom out. We've gone from Narmer smashing heads to Qa'a trying to keep the lights on. What does this all mean for us?
Well, when you look at the big picture, you see that history isn't a straight line of progress. We like to think it is, things just get better and bigger. But the first dynasty shows us a cycle.
Unification, consolidation, peak, cracks, crisis, stabilization.
Precisely. It's the life cycle of political power. It's born in violence. It builds a system. It reaches a moment of glory. And then internal and external pressures start to tear it apart. The first dynasty is the prototype for everything that comes later.
It's amazing to think that pattern was locked in 5,000 years ago. Quick side note, did they keep doing the human sacrifice thing?
Thankfully, no. That was one part of the prototype they realized was unsustainable. They replaced the actual servants with Shabtai figurines.
Little statues.
Yeah, little statues meant to come to life in the afterlife to serve the king.
A software update. Let's keep the ideology, but maybe stop killing the staff.
Exactly. A very necessary patch.
This brings me back to the final thought the sources left us with, which I haven't been able to stop thinking about.
Go on.
Was Egypt destined to survive? We look back and see 3,000 years of history, so it feels inevitable, but looking at this timeline, at the near collapse under Semerkhet, was it destiny? Or did it only survive because each of these specific rulers, in their own messy, imperfect ways, just kept the system alive long enough for the next one to take over?
That is the ultimate question. If Qa'a hadn't held it together, or if Hotep-Sekemwy hadn't reconciled the powers, the experiment might have ended right there. We might be talking about Egypt the way we talk about other lost Bronze Age cultures that just bloomed and vanished.
It makes you look at those museum statues differently. They aren't just gods frozen in stone. They were people managing a crisis.
It wasn't magic, it was management. If the management fails, the magic dies.
It wasn't magic, it was management. That is going to stick with me.
As it should.
And that is all for this deep dive into the First Dynasty, a story of blood, bureaucracy, and the invention of the state. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.